Today we're in for a long one. Back in May of 2019 I took some Lonicera cuttings from the hedge in my garden. I just stuck them in some water and waited until they rooted. By July they had done exactly that, so I took one and decided to make a bit of a Mame experiment. As you can see, the roots are very high up, so I just cut most of that long bottom bit off as it's basically dead. So I got this little awesome white pot and I planted it up in there. In November it's alive, nothing special, but that's the fun of it. It looks like it might be a little clump style at the moment, but I'm sure that will soon change. Anyway, I'm just removing some foliage with my blunt scissors, as it's a bit crowded in there, and then I left it in the shed over winter to have a little chill. In January 2020, back when the world wasn't such a mess, I was dealing with this little mess. I just give it a little trim, nothing really much going on. This tree really has a lot of growing to do at this point, and I've no idea how it's going to turn out. In February I gave it a repot. I know it's only been in this pot just over 6 months, but you'll understand in a minute. These trees are maybe the most aggressive root growers you will ever see. And it's in a tiny pot, so it really actually needs this repot. As you can see here, there is just loads of roots everywhere. It's completely insane. So I raked it all out and this is what I was left with. It's pretty impressive for 6 months. So I just cut everything back, and of course I went hard, which this species can really take. I really don't think I can explain just how much they love to grow roots. So after a good hack, I was left with this. No, not this. This. Who's seen that coming? Don't worry, it all works out fine. Don't panic. So anyway, I just cleaned up the pot and stuck it back in. As you can see, there's plenty of room for the roots to stretch out in this tiny pot, which I'm sure they will do in no time. Certainly not the most ideal size to be using, but I've no space and I like it, so you know, I'm going to do it. I just backfilled it with soil and that was it. Poked it down a bit to settle it in and watered it up. A very simple repot with a very aggressive prune. Here it is after my brutal attack. I promise this twig stump actually grows and gets more interesting by the end of the video. Anyway, let's see how it goes for the rest of 2020. In March it's growing, so that's a good start. I didn't kill it with that extreme root prune. In April it's not changed too much, but I felt I could get away with a little trim. So I just took a little bit off each branch to see if we get some new shoots growing. In May you can see that is exactly what happened. Normally I'd let trees like this grow out all season to thicken and develop a nice structure. This is a tiny tree, totally designed to just mess about with. So there'll be various prunes and whatnot carried out as it develops. I've no real plan, just do what I feel like and what I think might work. In June it's growing some pretty leggy growth, which is very typical for the species, so of course I give it a little snip. At the time I wanted the lower branches to be part of the tree, but you'll see later on they don't quite last the journey. Here you can see what I removed. Not only is it long, but it's covered in side shoots. This is a crazy grower. I just gave it a break in July, so you know, I can't be kind. It's growing well though. In August it's very out of control, so yes, you guessed it, another little trim. You'll see I'll remove one of the lower branches. It just wasn't working for me, it just looked kind of weird. It was not at the right angle or position. I initially wanted to start a sort of clump style growth, but the tree didn't want to cooperate. So you'll see most of these branches down there are dead now. I kept just one for now, just in case it decided to do something of interest, but I think its day is maybe number 2. The beauty of trees like this is you don't really need a plan. You can just mess about and see what a tree wants to do, and then start working with it over time to end up with something decent, hopefully. You'll start to see the design of this tree will start to come together soon, which you can hopefully see more clearly here in September. So I'm going to focus building some structure on the top of that main trunk. In October it's growing like crazy. This tree lives most of the year under the Plant Photonics grow light. It's a fast grower anyway, but the extra light is just clearly sending it into overdrive. In November it's slowed down at this point and I'm getting it ready for the winter, and I've been lowering the light levels over the past few weeks to prepare it for the shed. This isn't a tropical tree, so it needs a little cold rest. Here it is in December, just before I put it in the shed. There's no surprise here, but it hasn't changed by January. It's just been sat chilling in the pretty much dark. But now it's back inside and under the grow light, so of course it's time for a trim. You can see it was looking pretty bushy before I started my pruning, and then I took it back pretty hard. I've lost that footage, but that's fine. This video is already long enough. I'm sure you can all imagine what I was doing. You can also see that all the lower branches and dead stubs are gone. The clump style dream is now fully over. So I just had to wait a few weeks for the new buds to start to push, which you can see here. Then it was time to repot. This repot is basically a carbon copy of the one from earlier on. Bonsai work is pretty easy. You just repeat the same few things over and over again for a few years until it looks good. The only trick is knowing when to do everything, which is also kind of easy to learn. Anyway, you will see when this is all raked out that there is an insane amount of growth. If you remember, there was not a lot of roots on this a year ago, so it just shows how much of a grower this species really is. As I sit here and edit these videos, I can never remember what I did, so I'm wondering, probably like you are now, if I'm going to massacre the roots again. I'm going to guess I did. I kind of do like doing that. So quite a gentle trim at first, although fairly hard by some standards, but quite reasonable. Yes, again, I took it back super hard. I can't help myself. It looks so much better with all that lower mess removed. I think that was a very good idea. So let's get this little tree potted back up. And as you'll see, I actually used some wire as I knew this wasn't going to be able to stand up on its own after what I just did to it. Here it is after, all ready for the 2021 growing season. In March, there's not much going on. It just looks kind of sad. Maybe I've finally killed it. Pushed it over the edge. But of course not. As you can see in April, it's sprinted off again. This tree will simply not stop. By May, it's got a bit out of hand. For me, it's time for the first trim of the season. But I've lost count how many times I've actually trimmed during this video. It must be double figures now. Certainly getting close. So here it is after. I kind of like where it's heading. And of course, a few weeks later in July, it's completely wild again. The growth rate on this thing is just unbelievable. So of course I pruned it back again. I just snipped everything back to a couple sets of leaves. This species is notorious for getting very bushy, which is why it's used for hedging, and I think you can really start to see that trait shining through. I think it's really starting to take shape. It's changed so much since the start of this video. Hopefully you all agree it's starting to look a little bit interesting now. I'm also hoping you start to realise this is a seriously fast grower. So it shouldn't be a shock to you that it's growing loads in July. I gave it a prune, but I didn't film that. I was starting to realise I have way too much footage of this tree. But here it is after, looking pretty cool. And yes, August is the exact same. It really started to get bushy. But I took it back the best I could, and you can see it's got this interesting angle to it. In September I probably could have trimmed, but I think my scissors were tired and I just left it alone for once. In October it's gone wild again and out of control. But that's okay, it should be slowing down now for winter. In November I had to go away for a few days, but this is the tree with the most foliage and the smallest pot. So I had to thin it out just a little bit to make sure it wouldn't dry out too much while I was away. All the other trees can take a few days alone, but this needed a little help. But I didn't want to prune it too much, as it's really not a good time to do this type of work, as it's nearly time for its winter sleep. But luckily it made it through my trip okay and it's survived. This tree is hardcore after all. And now it will go for its winter rest and then we'll see it next year. Thanks for watching, see you next time.